bathroom's a little more soundproof than I really originally thought. Really good insulation in this building. It's awesome. Well, hey, good morning. My name's Justin. I'm one of the pastors here. Just our little attempt of awakening you to the fact that next week, our service times, you're at the last 10:30 service of 2018. All right, next week, if you get here at 10:30, you're going to be half an hour early. You might be greeting. Okay, so you'll show up with the greeters, and you'll be ready to go for the 11 o'clock service. So you get an extra half hour of sleep next week. I'm a little out of breath. One of my New Year's resolutions was to get in shape. I'm 14 days in, and obviously running to the stage, I can't even handle that. So, all right. Well, hey, my name is Justin. I'm one of the pastors here, and so funny. I got to tell you guys this little story. They already left, so I can tell the story. So we had some volunteers working in Guest Central first service. We did not tell them that this was a joke. And so Wes is up here going, has anybody seen Justin? And the Guest Central volunteer, to their credit, sprinted into action and went running up and down the hallways, looking in every single classroom, trying to find me, and not knowing that I was right there on my phone with the whole thing being a joke. So hopefully we did not spook anybody or freak anybody out back in the back today or during the second service. But next week, 9:30, 11 a.m., and we'd love to see you there. So if you're a guest with us today, as Wes said, I know you can be a lot of different places, especially on this cold January morning. And we're honored that you would spend part of your Sunday with us. One of the things we say around here at Hope City all the time is Hope City is a place where you can belong before you believe. And so no matter where you are spiritually today, if you're coming back to church as a New Year's resolution, if you've been in church your entire life, no matter where you are spiritually today, we hope that you feel welcome, you feel at home here. And I'd love to meet you after the service. I'll be out in the lobby. I'd love to shake your hand, introduce myself. Last week was an incredible kickoff to 2018. If you weren't able to be with us, we had Tiffany and Jeremy Lee with us. Tiffany is a recording artist in Nashville, Tennessee. Her stage name is Plum, and her and Jeremy shared their story of heartbreak and loss and hope and redemption, and there wasn't a dry eye in the place, I don't think. And it was just really powerful. And so you can go on to our website, hopecityindy.cc, or you can download the Hope City app. Tons of stuff that you can do on the app. You can check in. You can sign up for the next class, which is January 18th, right after this service, or January 18th, January 28th, right after this service. You can follow along on the message notes, and you can watch last week's message, which is already on the app. And I'd love to have you do that. It was just a really encouragement. And today I want to wrap up this mini-series that we're in called Hope Lives Here. And my prayer for 2018 is that this place, not the building, but who we are as people, that we would be a people where hope resides. Like when people walk in the door of this place, or people interact with us at work or at school or at the gym, that they would get a sense that there's something different about us, that there's a sense of hope in our heart that permeates every aspect of our life. And that's kind of the direction that I want us to go for 2018. I want this place to be a heartbeat of hope in our city. I don't know what your church background was like. Maybe for some of you, you never went to church as a kid. I talked to some folks after first service. They other than weddings and funerals, they never went to church. It was just not a part of their family DNA. It was not a part of their upbringing. It was just something that other people did. They were good people. They came from good families. They just didn't go to church. Maybe that's your story. Maybe you just went to church growing up on Christmas and Easter. All right, that's just kind of something a tradition that you guys had. You just felt like it was the right thing to do. Christmas and Easter, it's that time of year we're going to go back to church. Maybe for some of you, you grew up and you went sporadically to church. You went when you were invited by a friend, or you had some type of church background, or maybe you went when you were younger, and then in high school or college, you kind of fell away from church, and maybe you've come back as an adult, or maybe you're on your way back right now. Maybe for some of you, you didn't go to church that often, but you went through confirmation classes, or you were christened as a kid, or you were sprinkled as a baby, and you had this spiritual or religious heritage that you didn't necessarily engage in, but it was handed down from your parents or your grandparents, and you were a part of a denomination, and you were able to be confirmed in that denominational system. For me, I went to church every time the doors were open. That's not an exaggeration. My parents became Christians when I was a baby, and so I grew up in church. And back in, when I was a kid, eons ago, there was different levels of church, okay? So there was Sunday morning experience was Sunday school first, and then worship after. Some churches do worship and Sunday school, at the same time, and you can flip-flop. But we had Sunday school, which was like this Bible study that you went to before the church service began. It was at 9 o'clock, and then the service was at either 10:30 or 11. And Sunday school was all about learning the Bible. It's all about, hearing the stories from the Bible. We had flannel graphs. If those of you that are under 30, Google what a flannel graph is. And, we memorized scripture and did all this stuff to learn about God in Sunday school. And then after that was the church service. And I was so pumped when I got to school age because we had this thing called children's church when I was a kid. And there were puppets in children's church, all right? So there's this little stage with a black curtain, and then these hands would pop up, and they'd teach you God's word with the puppets, all right? It was cutting-edge stuff, you guys, all right? I am who I am today because of the puppets. I just want to tell you that. And so that was like children's church. Then we had Sunday night church. Those of you that grew up in church, maybe you recognize this. And Sunday night church was different than Sunday morning. It was like church light. Okay, so you didn't have to get as dressed up on Sunday morning, or as you did on Sunday morning. You kind of come casual, maybe some slacks, maybe a dress shirt, button-down collar, not a tie or a suit. You kind of come casual. And then what was amazing about Sunday night is it would be like favorite hymn night sometimes, like when the worship leader wasn't prepared and picked out the songs ahead of time. And so you get there and they'd be like, who has a favorite hymn they'd like to sing? Let's everybody grab their hymnals right now. And somebody raise their hand. I'd like to sing hymn number 43, 'Tis So Sweet to Trust in Jesus. Then the worship leader would look over at the organist and the pianist and see if they know that one. And if they got the nod, then we'd all stand and sing all stanzas of hymn number 43. All right, that was kind of Sunday night church. All right, and then the pastor, he was exhausted from the morning. So he basically did a devotion that he had written that afternoon, trying to prepare for Sunday night church. It was very, very short, very sweet, very to the point. We were out of there. Then we had Wednesday night church. And Wednesday night church was either a Bible study or it was youth night. And we'd get to the church. Sometimes there would be chili beforehand. Somebody would be a supper that was served beforehand. It wasn't called dinner. It was supper, all right? Because you had supper before the Wednesday night church. And then when I was like in 6th or 7th grade, we lived next to a Baptist church. And my mom signed us up for Awana. And I didn't grow up Baptist, never been to Awana. But for like 2 years, we went to Awana every Thursday night. And now that I have kids, I just realized my mom had 4 kids, and she just wanted them out of the house as much as possible. And so she just signed us up for everything, right? Like we went to Awana on Thursday. So we were at Sunday morning Sunday school, Sunday morning church, Sunday night church, Wednesday night church, Thursday night Awanas, and we're not even Baptists. But that's what we did, all right? And then that doesn't even talk about, the Bible studies, the men's breakfasts, the linger longers. That was like fellowship after the church. They called them linger longers. Thank God that marketing has gotten better in the last 30 years. We had church camp. We had Bible bowl. We'd get stars each week for attendance. We'd get stickers for bringing our Bibles to Sunday school. We'd get a pizza party if we could memorize the books of the Bible, or if we brought a friend. Like if you brought a friend, it was such a big deal, pizza party for the whole class, all right? Like nobody brought friends. And so, hey, it's Domino's night because Justin brought a friend to church, all right? That was just a big deal. But I grew up in this it just felt performance-based. I didn't realize that until I looked back on it, that my religious experience was all about accomplishing and doing, and how many things could I check off this list, and how many services could I go to, and how much could I learn about God. And not that there's anything wrong with religious experiences, not that there's anything wrong with attending church. In fact, I exist, like my livelihood is you coming to church, all right? So I'm not downgrading that at all. I want you to be here. But I learned 2 lessons that I thought I would share with you as we start 2018 from my upbringing, my religious experience. First is that churchishness wasn't optional. It's what we did. But religious activity doesn't equate to a transformed heart. Religious activity in our life doesn't equate to a transformed heart. When we started this church a year and a half ago, we knew that Indy did not need another church. We knew that in the city of Indianapolis, there's a ton of great churches. We did not set out to create a place for people to attend. It wasn't our agenda. It's not our agenda now. We didn't create something. We don't want to say, hey, let's start something and give people more obligation in their life. Let's give them a destination to go to. We started this church with this idea that there's a ton of great churches in our city. And we want to partner with as many of them as possible to reach people, the 1.4 million people who are far from God. But we feel like we have a unique expression that we can bring to our community to communicate the hope and the help and the second chance of Jesus. And that goes well beyond our religious activity. It goes well beyond where we attend. And here's why this is important. Because our goal here at Hope City is not religious activity. Our goal is heart transformation. And God doesn't want you to be better. He wants you to be different. God doesn't promise that you're going to be improved. God promises that you're going to be brand new. And that goes well beyond just attending church or singing songs. And all of those things are important. Reading the Bible, all of those things are important. But religion is about behavior modification and sin management. How good can you be for God? How much can you manage your addiction? How much can you manage your anger? How much can you manage your insecurity or your jealousy? How much can you manage your guilt or your lust? Religion tries to convince us to try harder. If you would just be a better person, if you would just try harder, God would love you more. If you would just go to church more often, your life would be better. If you would just do this or this or this, God would be impressed with you. And religion tries to convince you that a little more effort will gain more of God's love. And can I just tell you from personal experience, not from years ago, from my life, even as a pastor, that's an exhausting way to live. When you're trying to live your life, trying to impress God, trying to earn more of God's love, more of God's favor, more good standing with God, it's actually counter to everything God longs for you to be. And it's tiring. And even though we're only 2 weeks into 2018, some of you come in today and you're exhausted. Because what you've realized is that you can't be good enough. You can't do enough. You can't perform enough. You can't jump through enough hoops. You can't manage your sin. You're a horrible sin manager. You still get angry. You still lust. You're still jealous. You're still insecure. You still feel fearful. Like you can't manage those things in your life. But transformation is so different. Transformation is about giving up. It sounds counterintuitive. But it's about admitting that we can't do anything to perform for God or to impress God or to earn God's love. And when you and I are willing to come to that place, would we admit that we are powerless against the things that we're trying to change in our life? Something amazing happens. God does something that only He can do, and that's transform our heart. See, we don't have the capacity to transform our heart. But when we give up, we say, okay, God, I realize I can't work hard enough. I can't impress you enough. I just need to give up. God moves in and He begins to transform our heart. And life transformation is at the heart of who we want to be as a church. The second thing I've learned from my religious upbringing is that knowledge about Jesus isn't the same as a relationship with Jesus. I got into a place in my spiritual journey about 12 years ago where I realized that I knew a ton about Jesus. But over the course of time, I had stopped, not all at once, gradually. I had gradually stopped cultivating an intimate relationship with Jesus. I knew a ton about Him. I just didn't really have a connected, intimate relationship with Him. Have you ever been there? Where you can quote some scripture, you just don't really have a heart connection to God anymore. If you and I met for the first time and we were out in the lobby, you introduce yourself to me, tell me your name, and I tell you my name, and you tell me a little bit about your family, and a little bit about your job, and a little bit about your background, and then you say to me, which a lot of people do say this to me, hey, tell me about your wife. I hear she's an incredible person, which nobody ever says that about me, right? They just say that about my wife. Hey, tell me about your wife. I hear she's amazing. And so let's say that you just say that to me, which is a typical statement that I get, and I get to brag on my wife, and I say, yeah, my wife, she is pretty amazing. She's 5'6". She has blonde hair, blue eyes. She has one brother, one sister, two parents. She's from Joliet, Illinois. I call it the Joylet. She weighs, I'm not going to go there, all right? I'm not going to tell you what she weighs. But I just give you stats about her, right? I just start rattling off stats. Here's who she is, right? She graduated in 1993 from Joliet Central High School. She drives a minivan. Like, I just start giving you stats about her. That's not what you're asking, right? But what if you say, hey, tell me about your wife? And I say, man, my wife, she is pretty incredible. She's the most amazing woman. She fights for the underdog, and she's passionate about overcoming injustice, and she sees the best in people, and she's the most amazing team player. And she speaks the truth, but she does it in a way that is loving. She has taught me what forgiveness and grace looks like, and she microwaves her coffee 10 times a day. And she is judgmental against people who drink cold coffee. And I say, and she has transformed the way that I look at life, and she loves to cuddle on the couch, and she watches Star Wars with our kids. You see the difference? Now, I think so often in church culture, it's easy to equate knowledge about God, how much can we learn about God, how much we can learn about Jesus, to a relationship with him. And make no mistake about it, I think knowledge about God, religious knowledge, is really important. Theology is really important. It guides our life. It's the guardrails of our life. But unless we're willing to dig a little deeper, unless we're willing to surrender a little bit more of our life, a little bit more of our heart to God, then all the religious knowledge is just us rattling off stats. And one of the things I want for us as a church in 2018 is I want us to know Jesus more. But more importantly, I want Jesus to know more of us by the end of this year. I want to help you get to a place where you give God more of your marriage, where you give God more of your finances, where you give God more of your anger, where you give God more of your weekend decisions, where you give God more of your relational brokenness, where you give God more of your wounds. Like, God can't heal the parts of our heart that we don't give to him. God can't transform the parts of our heart that we withhold for ourselves. And I want you to look back in December, and I want you to say, man, I have such a deeper relationship with God in December of 2018 than I ever did in January of 2018. I'm a different person than I was. When I was in college, we took a trip, field trip as a class to Willow Creek Community Church. It's in the suburbs of Chicago. This is 1994, 95-ish. And at that time, Willow Creek was the biggest church in the country. I mean, I grew up in Crawfordsville, and the church that I went to was the largest church in town. It was about 500 people. We had 3 services, all right, and one of them was contemporary, all right? And so we were cutting edge, all right? We still used hymnals. There was no screens. We did have overhead projectors, like transparencies that we switched out. That was how cutting edge we were. We had an acoustic guitar, okay? That was the cutting edge that we had. But we go to Willow Creek, and I had never seen anything like it. 20,000 people on this huge campus. We go up there as a youth ministry class to watch their youth ministry in action, and then we stayed for their Wednesday night service. And I'll never forget sitting in their auditorium and hearing their senior pastor say something that began to shape my view of the church. It began to shape my view of God, and it informs my ministry today. He said this, he said, the local church is the hope of the world. The local church is the hope of the world. And he said, it's God's plan A for bringing people back to him. That's all he's got. And I never thought about the church being hopeful. I thought about it being argumentative. I thought about it being divisive. I thought about it being polarizing and traditional and rigid and judgmental. I never, ever thought about it being hopeful. That statement just rang in my heart. It rang in my soul. When we were talking about the name Hope City for our church, we were kind of bouncing around different names for the church before we moved here. This is in April 2015, almost 3 years ago. And Trish sent me a text. She was in Dallas, Texas, and she sent me a text. She said, I just keep coming back to the word hope. And hope, as I define it, it's kind of an abstract term, and we toss around here a lot because it is the name of our church, and we say hope changes everything. The way that I think about hope is this belief, not just an opinion, but this core belief that things in your life can or will be different. That's the best way I know to describe hope. And so if you need hope in your marriage, there is this belief in your heart, this belief in your soul that your marriage can be different. If you need hope in a relationship, there's this belief in your heart that relationship will be restored or different or improved or changed. If you need hope in your finances, there's this belief that your financial situation is going to get better. If you need hope in a friendship, there's this belief that friendship is going to improve. And as we were talking about this name, Hope, Tricia didn't really like city attached to it. She just wanted Hope Church, and so it was, vote was 1-1, and then we sent it to the tiebreaker, which was me, and I said we're doing city. And so it's really the only thing I've decided in 22 years of marriage, so I felt really good about myself. But the reason I wanted city in there is because I wanted to know every time we said the name of our church that we were bringing transformation to a city. That we have this core belief, this soul level belief at our church, that things in our city can and will be different. And I don't know if you've ever looked to the church for hope. I don't know if you've ever experienced hope in the church. But when we put the name of Hope City, we put the logo up on Instagram and Facebook for the very first time, several people put this scripture underneath it. They commented with this scripture. And so I've had this scripture in my mind for the last couple of years that I want to share with you today that really describes what I want the heartbeat of Hope City to be. It's Hebrews chapter 6, verses 18 through 20. You can follow along on the screen, or it's actually in the app, and you can follow along on the message notes there. It says this: "So God has given us both his promise and his oath. These two things are unchangeable because it is impossible for God to lie." I love the promise of this text. Have you ever been lied to? Ever been betrayed? Ever have your confidence in someone diminished because they didn't really tell you all of the truth? God can be trusted. We get his oath, we get his promise, his character. It is impossible for him to lie. He is truth. He is the definition of truth. He can be trusted. He's never going to betray you. He's never going to lie to you. It's not in his character. Next verse: "Therefore, we who have fled to him for refuge can have great confidence as we hold on to the hope that lies before us." You ever had a season in your life, maybe some of you are in a season right now, where when it rains, it pours? If one thing goes wrong, 5 things go wrong. You have an issue with your adult kids, and then your car breaks down, and then your water heater goes out, and your boss lays you off. I mean, there's just something always happens, like where you just need a break. You just need rest. You just need refuge. The scripture is so clear that God is a person we can trust, and he's a person we can run to. He's a refuge for us. He's shelter for us. He's protection for us. The next verse, verse 19, "This hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls." Hope, this belief that things can and will be different in our life, it's an anchor for our soul. It keeps us grounded. It keeps us secure. It leads us through the curtain into God's inner sanctuary. Now, what the writer is doing there is he is describing an invitation to you and to me that is big news, because I'll get to that in just a second of why it's so big. But it's an invitation into an intimate relationship with God. The writer here calls it the inner sanctuary. The reason that term is used is back in Jewish culture, there was this belief that there were only certain people that were allowed into the inner sanctuary of the temple. It was called the Holy of Holies. And on one day a year, one person was allowed into the inner sanctuary to experience God's presence, and that was the high priest. Nobody else, not any other priest, not any other common person, only one person was invited into the inner sanctuary. So here the writer of Hebrews is painting this picture of the hope that we have in God, the trust that we can have in God, the refuge that we can have in God. And he says, hey, and he has invited you into the inner sanctuary. There is no barrier now for you to experience the presence of God. You know why? The very next verse. Jesus has already gone there before us. He is the ultimate high priest. So he's saying, hey, now there is zero barriers. Through a relationship with Jesus, you have equal access to God. In other words, there is hope for everyone. Hope is for everyone. Hope should live here. Hope should live at Hope City. Everyone is invited. As I took some time to think through the word that I felt like over Christmas break, the word that I felt like I wanted to focus on, or I wanted to define us in 2018. I've never really done that personally for my own life, but I just felt like this word engage just kept coming up in my heart, coming up in my mind, that 2018 is the year that we as a church just engage in all that God is doing. What does that look like? Last year, I think if I could describe what last year looked like, I think last year was building, launching, attracting. That was kind of our activity 2017. We were just getting off the ground. We were trying to get our name out there, trying to get people aware, hey, we're a new church. We meet in a banquet hall. Not that attractive, not that impressive, but come and see what God is doing. And so we're just constantly, all of our energy was trying to launch this thing, to get it off the ground. And this year, I feel like it's all about building our faith and engaging in our faith and growing in our awareness and understanding of who God is and all that he wants to do in our life and in our church. Here's the challenge. When I say this, on average, the typical American churchgoer, people who would say they go to church on a regular basis, typically go to church once every 3 weeks. Those are considered regular attenders. 10 years ago, it was once every 2 weeks. 20 years ago, when I grew up as a kid, it was once every 1.5 weeks. And so church attendance in our culture just isn't really as important or as prioritized as it used to be as a culture. And I get it. I have a son that plays travel basketball, and he's going to be gone starting in February, March. He's going to be gone for travel basketball for the next 3 or 4 months. He's going to be gone several Sundays. So this isn't a guilt trip. This is just a reality. So when we say, man, we want to engage in 2018, it's challenging because every single week at Hope City, a third of our congregation is not here. Everyone is sick, puking, or has pink eye this morning because we had like a bunch of people cancel to volunteer today because of all that. So life just happens. Okay, that's just how it is. But from day one, we said that we're not going to measure our success by the amount of people that attend our church. We want to measure our success by how many people engage in the life of our church. And so if Hope is going to live here in 2018, we need to move from attending to engaging. Attending church is a weekly decision, but engaging in church is a posture of our heart, right? And so I want to walk through some different areas that I want us to engage in 2018. These will hit all of us differently. Some of you are really good at some of these. Some of you need to grow in some of these, but I want to challenge you with a few of these engagement things. The first was I want us to engage in 2018 in our Sunday experiences. Now, it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. It sounds like I'm being hypocritical because 5 minutes ago I said, hey, attendance isn't going to grow your faith. Religious activity isn't going to equate to a transformed heart. And now I'm saying engage in Sunday morning, all right? This is a guilt-free church. This is a guilt-free church. I have people come up to me all the time out in the lobby. It'll happen after first service. It's going to happen after second service. It'll happen every single week. And people be like, I am so sorry I have not been here since Christmas Eve. I am so sorry that I haven't been here the last few weeks. I'm so sorry. And 70% of the time that they tell me that, I had no idea that they weren't here the last 2 weeks, all right? I'm not standing at the door with a clipboard going, okay, Jeremy's here. All right, sweet, we can move on now. All right, who else gets a sticker? Who else gets an attendance sticker? We're throwing a pizza party next week, all right? I don't do that. I want you to come to church out of an overflow of your heart. I don't want you to feel guilty because I've, stood at the door and made you feel like, man, where were you? Where have you been? And so it's why if I meet you for the first time, I'm not going to say, are you new here? I'm going to say, how long have you been coming to Hope City? Because I don't want you to make you feel guilty if this is your first time here. Attendance is not our goal. Engagement is our goal. But what I'm talking about here is coming to church when you are here, expecting great things from God. Because God says wherever 2 or more are gathered, his presence is there, and that's pretty spectacular. I want us to come with a sense of anticipation. We want to create environments here that people love so they can experience God's love. From the parking lot to the cafe to the worship experience, we want you to leave here knowing that you encountered God today, because that's the only thing that changes everything. God's presence is not a great message, not good worship. God's presence is the only hope we have for life transformation. Back in November, many of you that have been here for a while, you know that our creative arts pastor, Stephen, he transitioned out, went back to school, actually becoming a teacher. And so for the last couple of months, we've been in this search process for a new creative arts pastor. And I just got to say, Kelsey Maxwell, who played keyboard today, sang today, since November 1st, she has, as a first-year teacher at Noblesville High School, she has probably poured in 20 to 30 hours a week on top of her full-time job to carry our worship experience for free as a volunteer. So I just want to thank her. I don't know if she's in the service. But we interviewed several people. It was just, they didn't fit for us. We didn't fit for them. It was just a number of different things. And so about mid-December, right before Christmas Eve, I connected with a buddy of mine who was a worship pastor in Fishers. And we were talking. I asked him if he could give us some help for Christmas Eve, our Christmas Eve service. We were short on some musicians. And he said, I'm transitioning out of my role at my church, and I'm going into real estate full-time. So we got together for lunch and started talking about kind of where we are as a church, what our vision is, and where he and his family are. I'm going to ask Daniel and Sandy and their kids to come up. I think they're in here. I can't see a thing. I don't know if it's my glasses, the fog, the lights, I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to ask them to come up. And many of you have seen Daniel. I just want to give them an introduction to you. And the more we talk, the more it's like, man, this could really be a good fit. And so Daniel started on January 1st as our part-time worship pastor. And so he's going to work about 20 hours a week here at the church and do real estate full-time. And he and Sandy have been awesome. Like, I came in last Friday. She's up here vacuuming the stage. I don't think the stage has ever been vacuumed before, okay? And she like had to look like the stage has never been vacuumed. But just like, there's just, these guys have servants' hearts. One of the things that my wife says about Daniel, she said he is so kind. He's just a kind person. And so you're going to hear a lot more from them. Sandy is you'll see her at the door. She's going to join our First Impressions team. Obviously, Daniel is going to be leading our creative arts. And I got a text message from one of our musicians last Sunday night, and he just said, great hire. Great hire. And so I'm excited for you guys to get to know these guys and welcome them to our community. So if you see them out in the lobby after the service, give their kids a hug. You know, anytime you transition, some of you know this, anytime you transition out of a church, you leave relationships and you leave friendships and you're going into a new environment. And we're all in a new environment here, so we're trying to discover what is this building about and where do we go, you know, where's the bathroom and where's the toilet paper and where's all this stuff, you know? And so they're trying to do that all alongside of us. And so give them a hug and make them feel a part of Hope City over the next few weeks, all right? Can we give them a hand? When I first got out of college, I got a youth pastor job at in Sandusky, Ohio, at a church, like a 120-year-old church. I was the first full-time youth pastor they'd ever hired, and my take-home pay was $16,000 a year. 2 months after we moved there in May. Trish had Micah, our oldest, in July. So here we are, we've been married for a year, we have a newborn baby, and I'm making $16,000, and we were swimming upstream financially. And so I started substitute teaching on Fridays, which is my day off, to make $40-50 a day, you know, of substitute teaching, just to help supplement some of the expenses that we had. A couple months into substitute teaching, I had a teacher come to me and say, hey, we're looking for an 8th grade basketball coach. I know you played college basketball. Would you be interested? And I said, I would love to do that. Tell me a little about the job. It was 8th grade. They went 0-15 last year. They didn't win a game. And it's an inner city school. We don't have a lot of funding. We don't have great uniforms. We don't have really good facilities. We don't even have a lot of basketballs. But we have a lot of kids that love the game, and I think you do a great job. And so I took on this project of coaching this team. And I'm not going to brag or anything, but we went 500 that year. Anyway, I think I might have missed my calling, but... So I take on this coaching position, and I'm just having a blast. I give all the kids nicknames. And we had this little kid, he was scrawny. He could barely keep his uniform on, and we called him Little Penny, because if you remember the Little Penny doll back in the 90s, he was like the size of that doll. And he's just super tiny, so we called him Little Penny. So we give all the kids nicknames. We started having a great time. Well, I'm a youth pastor. And they start asking me about the church that I work at. And I'm like, you guys should come. We had about 12 kids in our youth group at that time. It was a small church, and so a couple of the kids start coming, and then a couple more start coming. And I don't remember the demographics 100%, but I know our entire team was black. I know many of them came from one-income families, one-parent families. I know many of them grew up in poverty, and they started coming to our church. Some of them had never been to church before, never been invited to church. And they came to church like they'd never been to church before. They weren't dressed the part. They didn't act the way a church person would act. They weren't the right color. Almost immediately, I was pulled into an elders meeting with a warning not to love kids who didn't go to church more than I loved the kids that were already there. But halfway through the basketball season, right before Christmas break, there was this conference in Michigan, youth conference. And it was an outreach event. There's going to be a band there. There's going to be, pizza. And they were going to have a 3-on-3 tournament. We were going to take a group of kids from our church, and Trish said, we should invite your basketball team to go. They would have a blast. And I'm like, they're horrible at basketball. They're going to lose every 3-on-3 tournament. That we did. And I think it was like $50 a kid. And like 10 of the 14 kids wanted to go. So I went to our board at the church, and I said, hey, these kids don't have the money to go to this thing. Can we take it out of our budget? Nope, we don't have the money for that. So I went to individuals, and I raised the money to take these kids, these basketball kids, to this conference. 4 of those kids at that conference accepted Christ. I was so pumped, you guys. Came back, and it was going to be Youth Sunday the next Sunday. I reserved 2 seats in the front row, front of the church, reserved for the student ministry. All these basketball kids came. Our kids came. And our basketball kids looked like they didn't fit. And I'll never forget being in a board meeting the next Tuesday and being told that I need to stop bringing those kind of kids to this church. And that marked me. This last week, our president said some really inappropriate and distasteful things about people from other countries. I've been to Haiti. I've been to Kenya. God loves the people there as much as he loves us. And this isn't about politics. I don't really care who you voted for. If you voted for Clinton, if you voted for Trump, that's irrelevant, really. This is a theological conversation. Hope is for everyone. And I love the diversity of our church. I love that we're trying to reach people who are far from God, regardless of their social status, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their income level. It is a miracle to try to do that in Carmel, Indiana. But it's what God has called us to. You know why this is so important? Because a church for everyone must make room for anyone. Anyone. That's the heartbeat of our church. Regardless of your political stance, whether you support or don't support, I started thinking through the Facebook post I wanted to write as a response to some of those statements, because I was disappointed, I was angered. And then I thought back to this church that really didn't want my black non-Christian players there. I thought, how can we expect politicians to bring about change that the church isn't willing to? We have the hope of Christ. We have the Spirit of God. We've been forgiven of everything. We can't expect our elected officials to lead with love, to lead with grace, to be inclusive, if the church is a barrier to inclusivity. And so we're going to engage on Sunday morning, and we're going to open our doors wide open to anyone and everyone, because we believe that hope changes everything. As Connor would say, I'm running late, but I have to get through this. I make fun of me because I always run late, but I want to move on to, I got way off track there. So I want to engage in our Sunday morning experience. I want us to engage in community. Have you ever wondered why your spiritual growth intentions are often greater than your spiritual growth progress? If you're anything like me, the busier that I get, the less important relationships become. And so the busier I get, the more in isolation I live, and then I wonder why I feel lonely. Well, one of the things we discovered around here is that life change happens best in the context of community. We are better together. And so over the next couple weeks, starting next week, we're going to open up registration for our spring connection groups, and we could use 2 to 3 more connection group leaders. We have 128 adults in connection groups. I'd love to see that number double over this year. I'd love to have twice as many people in connection groups at the end of 2015. You know why? Not for a number's sake, because life transformation happens in the context of community. So if you thought about facilitating a group, I'd love to talk to you. You can fill that out on your card, take it back to Guest Central. We'll follow up with you this week. We have a building. We could host a women's Bible study. We could host classes or groups here. If your home is not available, you can meet here. We want to use this facility as a tool to help foster community. So we'd love to talk to you about that. And then we're going to open up registration over the next 2 weeks, and you'll hear a lot more about that on the 28th, because I'm going to spend a whole sermon message talking about the importance of community, but maybe this is the year that you engage in community at Hope City. Set aside 2 nights per month just to be with people and to grow relationally and spiritually. Next, we need to engage in generosity. Engage in generosity. If we're going to be the church that God has in mind in 2018, we're going to continue to grow in our generosity. And can I just say, I'm so proud of our church. For a 1-year, 3-month-old church, our church has grown tremendously in generosity. For some of you, 2017 was the first year you ever gave any money to a church. I'm just so proud of you. I'm so thankful for you. I'm so thankful for your generosity. I wanted to give you a few stats just so you kind of know, just get a picture. Our giving for 2017 was $248,000, which is, for a 1-year-old church, is absolutely amazing. If you factor in the building fund money that was over and above that, it's just over $300,000. Now, our offering for the month of January last year, total for the month of January, I think it was a 5-Sunday month. I'm not sure about that, but I think it was $8,000 for the whole month. Our giving for November of 2017, 11 months later, was $22,000. We grew significantly over the course of the year. We moved into this building, and within a week, our rent went from $8,000 per month for the Ritz-Charles to $13,375 plus utilities. And I got that bill this week, and I almost died. I almost went to heaven this week when I got that utility bill. Jesus, I'm coming for you, all right? So the $300,000 that was given was incredible. Our 2017 budget was $414,000. Now, some of you who are mathematicians and wizards might be thinking, whoa, wait a second there. There's a $114,000 deficit. How are we even sitting here? How are the lights on? Well, I raised outside support for year 1 of Hope City from different churches. We had outside churches, organizations, pastors, friends that gave, that made up that deficit for us. And around August, pastors that I'm friends with stopped taking my calls. I don't know why. They stopped answering their phone. Every time I called, it just said money on their caller ID, and they stopped talking to me. But here's what I wanted to share with you. Even with the raising of our rent by $5,000 a month, we're going to shift some other expenses and lower some expenses in other areas, and we're going to have the same budget for this year. So we're still going to have about $114,000 because not quite that much, because about half that support drops off. It's dropped off January 1. So we still are getting support some from outside organizations, but not as much. So our weekly need for this year is going to be just above $7,200. Our offering last week was $4,000. And so I just want to just be open and honest with you about that, and just kind of share with you that I feel like we have a great opportunity. And here's where I want us to get. It was funny, we had somebody here for the second time, and the first time they came to Hope City, I mentioned all of our finances, and they're like, every time I come, you talk about money. It's just like 3 minutes of the message, okay? So hold on for just a second. I want those of you that are skeptical about giving or nervous about your finances to experience God's grace and provision so much this year that you just give out an overflow. I'm never going to make you feel guilty. We say all the time, every single week, we say, if you're a guest here, don't feel obligated to give. You can come to this church every week for free. We're never going to charge you. Okay? We want this to be an opportunity for us to come together. And I just look around this room. I walked through this facility on Friday night. It was quiet. I was here all by myself. I just thought, look what a small group of people can do through the power of God and the provision of God. Like, we would not be here without some of you guys giving sacrificially and generously. So I want to say thank you. And I want to say, I just can't imagine all that God is going to do as we go throughout the year. Next is I want us to engage in serving. I want 2018 to be the year that some of us engage in serving. One of the things I'm most proud of about our church is we have about 150 adults that serve on a regular basis here. From everywhere from the cafe to greeting to security to Hope City Kids to our band, our vocal team, our tech team back in the back. Like, everybody comes together and just absolutely crushes it week after week. And if you've been sitting in the sidelines for a while wondering how you can get involved, I want to encourage you to consider joining a team this year. Every team would welcome new volunteers. The tech team, which is our lights, which we just got new ones. Tech team is lights. It's also Pro Presenter. It's literally, pushing a button and advancing slides, which our guys do a phenomenal job with. Our First Impressions team, which is cafe, greeters, security. Last week we had 29 kids in first service and 41 in second service. Our church has grown significantly over the last few months, and we could welcome new people to our Hope City Kids team. And rather than try to tell you about Hope City Kids, I had my brilliant 5'6", blue-eyed, blonde-hair wife do that, and she's going to share it with you right here.
Hey everybody, my name is Trisha Davis. I'm one of the pastors here at Hope City Church, and I just wanted to take a minute to invite you into our Hope City Kids experience. Our passion is to create environments where our kids find hope and follow after God, where they feel loved and known not only by their leaders, but loved and known by God, and that happens through our Orange curriculum. And it's amazing, you guys. You're missing out. If you've never been a part of it, we do everything under the sun, from worship to on-hands crafting, where we get to be creative about God's word, through small group time, where it's peers getting together and sharing their heart, even from our little toddlers to our elementary age. It's just an amazing experience. So what does it mean to be a Hope City Kid leader? Well, we have a multitude of environments that you can get involved in. And our goal here as leaders is to provide a place that when you decide to become a part of the Hope City Kid team, that whatever room you are involved in, you get to walk in all of your lesson, your supplies, anything that you would need to love on kids for that lesson, for that morning, is right there in front of you. Our heart and our desire as a Hope City Kid leader is that God would use you to encourage and inspire, to help kids find hope and follow after God. And so if that is something that you were interested in, I would love to talk to you after the service, because I believe that God can use you to help change this next generation, to help them find hope. And when kids find hope, it changes everything.
So, just every single week, you don't have to serve every week. We have volunteers that serve once a month. We have volunteers that serve twice a month. The great thing about having two services is you can serve one and attend one. And so if you're interested, the most impressive thing about that video is Ryan Lindeman's like 6'5", and sitting in that preschool chair. I was like, oh my gosh, that's commitment right there, right? Take it to the next level, right? On the kids' level right there is just awesome. But they have fun, and every week it's prepared for you to walk into that environment and to serve. And so if that's something you can sign up for and engage in this year, we would welcome that. You can fill that out on the card, take it to Guest Central, and we'd love to get you signed up to serve. We're going to offer a SHAPE class, which is basically like a spiritual gifts class in February. So you can come to the church. It's about a 50-minute to an hour-long class where you can discover your spiritual gifts, discover how you're wired, and what ministry might be best for you to get involved in. Because we don't want just warm bodies. We want to empower you and encourage you to be all that God has created you to be. Finally, I want to engage in sharing hope with others. I want us to engage in sharing hope with others. 12 years ago, my wife and I were separated, living in two different houses, 4 miles apart from one another. And hope was a speck of light. It was almost hopeless that we were going to make it. Through a mediator, we agreed 2 weeks after our separation to show up at the same church at the same time and go to church together. We had not seen each other in 2 weeks. I had been going to counseling, she had been going to counseling, but we hadn't started counseling together. And so we show up at Bridgeway Community Church in Fishers. And I remember standing there and gripping the front of the chair so tightly that my knuckles and my fingers were numb. And I used that chair literally to prop myself up because I was crying so hard during the worship. And can I just tell you, the lights didn't matter, the production didn't matter, how slick the worship set was did not matter. I was desperate for hope. I don't remember much about that service, but I remember the pastor standing up and saying, some of you just need to be reminded that God is a God of hope today. And I'm not going to say that service completely altered everything about my situation. It just gave me enough hope to get through that day. What could one invitation do? Next week we have our grand opening. It's not about this building. It's about us creating an environment where people can find hope so they can follow God. On each of your chairs, or maybe not on your chair as you leave today, you can get I saw somebody had a stack of invite cards. They were taking there's postcards, invite cards that you can share at work, at home, at school, with your family, your friends. We're going to roll out the red carpet next week, have a big celebration of all that God has done and what he's going to do this year. And there might be somebody who walks in here for the very first time, and it won't be about the message, and it won't be about the lights, and it won't be about the music. It'll be about God, a transcendent moment of God connecting his heart to theirs. And that could be your neighbor. That could be your coworker. That could be your sister-in-law. I'm never going to ask you to do anything that I'm not willing to do. And so since last summer, I've been inviting my neighbors to church. And I live in Zionsville. A lot of people in Zionsville don't want to drive to Carmel for church. I realized this after I moved to Zionsville. And some of you have experienced the same thing. Some of you live in Fishers or Noblesville, and they want to go to church close to their house. And I totally get that. So I've been inviting my neighbors to everything. Writing handwritten cards, putting it in their mailbox, because I'm at the passive-aggressive stage now. I don't hand it to them personally. I just put it in their mailbox because I don't want them to feel bothered by me. But nonetheless, I invite them. Last week, a few of my neighbors showed up here. One invitation, given repeatedly. And it was just this reminder that you never know how long it might take before that person says yes. And so, I don't know what that means for you. But if Hope City has been a place where you feel God's love, where you call home, where you feel like, man, this is a place where I can engage, I want to encourage you to bring somebody with you next week. Hey, let's go to church and then let's go to lunch, or let's go to brunch and then let's go to church. You never know how that one invitation could be used in a powerful way.